Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Section 1, Group 3, will be presenting on analysis on global business cycle. In this video, we will elaborate on certain economic declining events to convey the business cycle pattern in detail, which is the Great Depression, Asian financial crisis, global financial crisis, and also COVID-19. The Great Depression. The Great Depression was an extreme global economic depression of which occurred in the 1930s, originating in the United States. Personal income, tax revenues, earnings, and prices plummeted, while international trade dropped significantly by more than 50%. Unemployment is also increasing. Cities around the world have been badly affected. The causes of this economic depression is the collapse of the stock market in the 1929. When stock prices soared to unprecedented levels, investing in the stock market was seen as a simple way to make money, and even average citizens used a lot of their disposable income and even mortgaged their house to purchase stocks. When prices started their decline in October 1929, millions of overextended shareholders panicked and hurried to liquidate their shares, leads to the downturn and causing further panic. This then caused banking panics and monetary contraction, and also significantly reduced international loans and tariffs. American agricultural interests struggling as a result of overproduction and intensified competition from European and other agricultural producers. Human misery was the most destructive effect of the Great Depression. In a short period of time, global production and living standards have fallen dramatically. As much as 1/4 of the labor force in the developed countries was unable to find jobs in the early 1930s. Although conditions started to improve by the mid-1930s, the overall recovery was not completed until the end of the decade. For Americans, the 1930s will always put together photos of food lines, shuttered factories, rural poverty, and also so-called Hoovervilles where homeless folks sought shelters. It was a time when teenagers were drifters, weddings were delayed, and birth rate declined.
There are some factors that causes Asian crisis. The main factor is economic factors. Some Asian countries have improper foreign exchange policies. In order to attract foreign investment, on the one hand, they maintain a fixed exchange rate. On the other hand, they expand financial liberalization, providing opportunity for international speculators. For example, Thailand abolished the control on the capital market in 1992, just before its financial system was straightened out, making the flow of short-term funds unimpeded and providing conditions for foreign speculators to speculate on the Thai baht. In order to maintain the fixed exchange rate system, this country used foreign exchange reserve to make up for the deficit for a long time, which leads to the increase of foreign debt and the unreasonable structure of foreign debt of these countries. In the case of large medium-term and short-term debts, once the outflow of foreign capital exceeds the inflow of foreign capital and the country's foreign exchange reserves are not enough to make up for the shortage, the devaluation of the country's currency is inevitable.
The effects of Asian financial crisis. Crisis causes a recession in most of Asian countries. Consumer spending declined as large devaluations occurred, which led to rise prices in imported and raw imported material. Not only that, the total of GDP in most Asian countries declined sharply, especially in Indonesia. It also led to high in the number of unemployment while the Asian currencies declined. The crisis not only affected Asian area but the whole world. Due to the crisis, many investors were reluctant to invest in developing countries, which led to sharp decline in oil prices, which reached a low of about $11 per barrel towards the end of 1998. The reduction in oil revenue also contributed to the 1998 Asian financial crisis.
The 2008 financial crisis, or known as the Great Recession, is considered as the worst economic crisis depression. Over a decade later, many are still wondering what has changed and, most importantly, how this type of economic disaster can be avoided in the future. It is difficult to define the exact cause of the 2008 crisis. The collapse of the American housing market was one of the greatest factors. In the early 2000s, interest rates were so low that many Americans borrowed money to buy houses, causing house prices to increase rapidly. This episode, known as the US housing bubble, and lasted until the early 2006. When house price peaked, the burst of that bubble is considered as one of the main causes of the Great Recession. It started as a crisis in the subprime mortgage market and snowballed into a global collapse. The world economy experienced plummeting house price and a sharp increase in unemployment rates. In the US, more than 8 million citizens lost their jobs, approximately 2.5 million businesses were devastated, and close to 4 million homes were foreclosed in less than 2 years. Income inequality and increased debt, many people lost faith in the economic system. The recession officially ended in 2009, but its immediate effect lasted much longer than that. The unemployment rates in America reached 10% in 2009 and only recovered to pre-crisis level in 2016. The crisis brought the bank's potential shortcomings for the first time for millions of people around the world, but does it still matter today? The events of 2008 were essentially caused by decisions made years before regulators, politicians, and policymakers. It's been a decade since the Great Recession, and regulators insist that the global financial system has been altered since then.
The effects of financial crisis 2007 until 2008. It can be seen the crisis gives severe impacts toward the world, especially in economic aspects. Other than the economy slowing down, international trade decline, the crisis also causes bank failures. In April 2007, New Century Financial Corporation, one of the largest subprime lenders, filed for bankruptcy, and soon afterward many other subprime lenders ceased operation. This is because they could no longer fund subprime loans through the sale of MBS. Banks stopped lending to subprime customers, causing home sales and home prices to decline further. In fact, the number of unemployment also rose as 5.5 million American jobs were lost due to slow economic growth. Evictions, which were the landlord removing the tenant from rental property, as well as most business slowed down and failed, also occurred during the period.
What is COVID-19? COVID-19 is an infectious disease caused by a newly discovered coronavirus. It was called severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2, also known as SARS-CoV-2. The symptoms that was commonly found is fever, cough, shortness of breath, sore throat, and headache. For the shortness of breath, they might need medical assistance and quarantine at the hospitals. It was often observed by the healthcare workers that the symptoms was mild and started gradually. You all wonder, how did the COVID-19 pandemic begin? It all started from a bat and then transferred to an intermediate animal, which is pangolin. And then the virus jumped to a human. The transfer of the virus started from a wet market, which was first identified amid an outbreak of respiratory illness cases in Wuhan City, Hubei Province, China. Due to the virus, people have started a new way of life by using masks to prevent being infected. Specialists around the world have voiced out their opinion to shut down the illegal wildlife trade, just like the wet market in Wuhan.
Over the longer horizon, the deep recessions triggered by the pandemic are expected to leave lasting scars through lower investment, an erosion of human capital through lost work and schooling, and the fragmentation of global trade and supply linkages. Emerging market and developing economies will be buffeted by economic hardwoods from multiple quarters, pressure on weak healthy care systems, loss of trade and tourism, dwindling remittance, subdued capital flows, and tight financial conditions amid mounting debt. Exporters of energy or industrial commodities will be particularly hard hit. The pandemic and efforts to contain it have triggered an unprecedented collapse in oil demand and the crash in oil prices. Demand for metals and transport-related commodities such as rubber and platinum used for vehicle parts has also tumbled, while agriculture markets are well supplied globally. Trade restrictions and supply chain disruptions could yet raise food security issues in some places.